All right, good afternoon, and thank you all very much for having me. I hope everybody got a cup of coffee or something, because if there's one thing I did learn in school, it's mashed potatoes and pasta. Do not mix with economics. So hopefully everybody's wide awake. Getting right into it, I'm Chris Chidzik with the Association for Manufacturing Technology. Just a quick background on AMT. We were founded back in 1902 as the American Machine Tool Builders Association. I love this picture because it's kind of just like an old picture of what things used to look like back then, and it's really different from what you would see on a shop floor today. Since then, AMT has been gathering data on the market, advocating for manufacturers, and if you haven't heard of AMT, I'm pretty sure you've heard of IMTS. We put on IMTS every other year in Chicago, which will be in about 4 weeks now, just down the road at McCormick Place. That's the other reason I really like that picture, is because it's the McCormick Grain Harvesting Equipment Company. So that was a nice little transition. Speaking of IMTS, Shibaura Machinery will be there this year. So if you're there, definitely stop by, booth 339424. Make sure to check it out. There will be a lot of cool technologies, things to see there. Kind of when I was thinking about this presentation, I was thinking about, the whole 50th anniversary, what was happening back in the day, and do have to admit the first thing I thought of was IMTS. IMTS 1974, and it really made me think. I don't really have to probably say this to anybody in the room, but outside of people in manufacturing, I think a lot of people think of the 1970s as the heyday of American manufacturing, and it's just kind of, been in pretty steady decline ever since. So kind of what I want to do today is just talk a little bit about what it looked like in 1974, where we've come since then, and then what manufacturing technology is going to look like for the rest of this year, and hopefully a little bit into the future. So just starting out with what we can see in the 1974 IMTS pictures, I do have to admit I'm kind of a nerd, so I had a ton of fun scrolling through these albums, looking at all the old pictures. I don't know what shocked me more, the machinery itself, the outfits that people were wearing, or how many booths actually just had an ashtray just sitting out front waiting for everybody. And then I thought a little bit more, and just that one picture up top of all the guys looking in different directions. I forgot there was a day where you just took a picture and hoped for the best. You didn't say, Jim, you're not looking, let's do it again. So a lot has changed since 1974, not just in manufacturing. But this is actually a really interesting week, because if you took a time machine back 50 years today, Richard Nixon would be president. Tomorrow he would resign. And then on Friday, Gerald Ford would be president. So if the news seems like it's happening at a rapid pace today, it has been for a while. So this was a crazy week. Looking at who was chair of the Federal Reserve back then, it was Arthur Burns. He would not be looked upon favorably in history. One of the most famous quotes is either he was too incompetent to act or chose not to. So that's not a really good review by history. One of the things he really went down in infamy for was keeping interest rates really, really low. And a lot of the impetus for this was speculated that he was caved into pressure from Nixon during his re-election campaign to try and keep the economy bolstered throughout the election of 1972. That unfortunately resulted in massive inflation throughout the remainder of the 1970s and a little bit into the 1980s. That was only really crushed when Volcker kind of really ramped up the interest rates, as some people probably remember. Looking at the economy a little bit more widely, 1974, we were in the middle of a recession. It was teed off by the first Arab oil crisis in response to geopolitical conflict in the Middle East. I'm going to keep going through all of these things. I think you're going to notice a common theme that, we're still kind of going through all of this. But so in 1974, we were in the middle of a recession that would last about a year and a half, all the way until 1975. So looking back at what manufacturing was doing during that time period, we can kind of infer what manufacturing has been doing based on the share of GDP. Manufacturing is typically around 11 to 13% of GDP. And The data doesn't exactly go all the way back to 1974, but I went back to 1980 because I thought that was probably good enough. If it was good enough for Back to the Future, it was good enough for me. So going back through 1980 to today, we can see that the value of manufacturing output has almost tripled in that time. And looking forward to see where GDP is going, over this time, it has been that consistent 11 to 13% output. So looking specifically at forecasts of what GDP is going to do will give you a pretty good idea of where manufacturing is going to be going for the remainder of the year. Now, I just wanted to start off with the Federal Reserve. Their last projection from the June SEP was 2.1% growth. Now, it is of note that the Fed kind of engineers what they think will happen or what they want to happen, not really what they think will happen, because not every forecaster really controls the levers that they do. So take that one with a grain of salt. The next one I want to highlight is from Oxford Economics. Their latest forecast from July 11th was up 2.3%. Now, they came out in the beginning of the year with a pretty optimistic forecast for this year's GDP. They've been slicing it down ever since, but it's still at a pretty healthy 2.3%, which is a little bit above overall trend growth. And then I do have to admit, I am a little bit more on the optimistic side. I don't know how that bodes for me as an economist, but I do like to put in one more little bit pessimistic one for balance. ITR Economics. They tend to be on the lower side of forecasting generally. So they're at 1.1%, and that was from April 26th of this year. I tried to look for a more recent forecast prior to this, but I couldn't really find it. But this is just a general picture of where things are likely headed. And although there is a bit of a spread, things are generally projected to remain positive. Oxford Economics took recession out of their base case at the end of last year. ITR's been a little waffly if there would actually be a recession or not, and the Federal Reserve just never had one in their base case. And given how the overall economy is going to perform, let's just drill down and take a look at manufacturing. What has manufacturing been doing in this time? And this is industrial production for durable manufacturing, the sector that uses the parts that are produced by manufacturing technology. And they are at an incredibly elevated rate. It's been since 2022 that industrial production for durable manufacturing has been incredibly high. And that's been driven by several different things. The first thing I really want to highlight is reshoring. There's been a lot of anecdotes about it, but we can actually see this in the data, that during COVID, manufacturers realized the value of having a supplier down the street or having multiple suppliers very close. And we can see this in our data because manufacturing technology orders from industries that typically hadn't ordered much just exploded between 21 and 22. And that's because those critical components that are necessary need to be made somewhere close. And the closer they are to the point of consumption, the better. Second is government investment. Love it or hate it, the government did pass 3 huge spending bills that did funnel a lot of money into manufacturing. And we're just starting to see that crop up in a lot of the construction data and a few other areas. Now, a large portion of this money hasn't even gone out the door yet. I think last I looked at it, it was about a quarter of the actual money has been assigned to a project and put out the door. If anybody is going to be at IMTS this year, we actually have an economist from the White House that works in the office that oversees all of these programs coming to talk about what the impact has been, what the future is going to look like, and how manufacturers can take advantage of these opportunities. So that's been a huge boom to manufacturing recently. And then next is private investment. In addition to the government investment, there's been huge private investment. Again, particularly in construction right now, but you can't really start making things unless you have a factory to make them in. So construction's really booming right now, and in the next couple months to years, we're probably going to see that trickle out throughout the rest of the manufacturing economy. And another thing we wanted to highlight is data centers. One of the things that we're seeing in the data right now is manufacturers of components for electricity generation and distribution are, I hesitate to use the word renaissance because I feel like it's overused, but they're going through a really good time right now. As all these tech companies are using more and more computing power, more and more data centers are needed, more and more power is needed to supply them, and that's just kind of a cyclical boom for manufacturing. Now, given all these trends, let's just take a look quickly at what that means for manufacturing technology orders. And I just quickly wanted to highlight what it typically looks like. So these are orders from 2015 to the end of 2019. And AMT tracks manufacturing technology in 3 different ways. First, we have our USMTO survey, which tracks the machinery itself, our cutting tool market report, which tracks the consumable tools that go in the machine, and the work holding report, which covers the work holding devices that holds the stock metal. Now, this will show you a pretty typical pattern. They pretty much move pretty tightly together. There are, every now and then, some occasional spikes in machinery orders, but then they taper down, and you'll see about 2 quarters later, that's when the tooling and work holding really tick up, and people are making things. For non-manufacturing audiences, I always like to joke, when the machinery goes up, people want to make things, and when the tooling goes up, people are making things. So that's really how you can kind of interpret these graphs. But until recently, you'll see that from 2017 to 2018, there was this massive spike in machinery orders. And if you think back to that time, we were just starting to emerge from a really big slowdown in manufacturing from about 2015 to 2017. Industrial production bottomed out, manufacturing employment declined. I think manufacturing lost about 4,000 jobs over that 2-year period, which doesn't really sound like a lot until you realize that the rest of the economy grew by 3.2 million jobs. So right as we're coming out of that, around 2017 Q4, that's when you see that spike. Machinery orders come down, tooling and work holding go up, and then what's that other spike? That was 2018 IMTS. So that really pushed orders up again. Until COVID, that was one of the second best year on record for manufacturing technology orders. Then, things kind of started to trickle down. We started to see things go back to the normal pattern. And then COVID happened, and we saw this. So there was just a massive, massive spike in orders for machinery. And if you think back to the time, there was a huge shift in how consumers spent their money. Instead of going out to restaurants, people were buying pots and pans. Instead of buying new cars, they would buy different things. Instead of taking the bus, they would buy a car. And just different things like that really just changed how people spent their money and consumed, which required additional investment in manufacturing technology to meet those demands. And we've been at a really, really elevated pace ever since in machinery orders, and tooling and work holding are just finally starting to get back to that level. And on the right hand of the chart, you'll see we're just starting to kind of return to the normal patterns of consumption of manufacturing technology. And we really like to explain that chart with a cautious tone, because at the time it looked really scary. The last time a pattern like that emerged was in the 1980s, right before a really, really massive recession, and a really bad time for manufacturers. But this time we think was really different for a lot of reasons. And just summarizing 3 of them really quickly is just the natural lag in the data. Excuse me. Machinery orders are collected when they're ordered. Cutting tools are counted when they're shipped. So just that natural lag, there's a little bit of play there. However, COVID just totally upended that. If you look at a machine, there is just a delay in just about every part of the machine. First, you couldn't get the casting, then you couldn't get chips for the control, then there was an issue with ball bearings for the linear guides. Just point to a part of a machine and you can isolate an issue where that was. So just naturally stretching out that time between when you ordered a machine and when it was on the floor doing work would kind of start to cause that. And then secondly was non-machinery issues. Say you have the machine, say you have enough employees, say you have all of the inputs you need. if your shipment of steel doesn't come in, you're not really going through any tooling or wearing down your work holding. So that could explain that a little bit. And then finally is automation. We saw massive rises in demand for automation during this period. And while automation increases the average value of a machine order and contributes to that spike, in a lot of cases, it would actually contribute to using less tooling. There's more optimized paths, there's more predictive maintenance, less crashing, less tool breakage, less chatter. The more value assigned to a machine, in a lot of cases, reduces the amount of tooling needed. So those three combined, we really think, starts to explain why that massive spike happened and why it was different from the previous experience where it really led to a big recession. Now, with all that in mind, how is that affecting capacity utilization? And it was mentioned a little bit earlier, right around that 80–85% mark, and we've been well above that for a long time. And a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now are more related to labor availability than technology availability. So capacity is still high, and it's been trending downward. But remember, this is overall for durable goods manufacturing. If you look at something like the aerospace sector, for example, that has just been a straight line up of capacity utilization. And we put out a press release every month, and aerospace has been consistently increasing their orders of machinery every month this year because they need that additional capacity, despite a whole bunch of issues and perceived problems with the industry. But durable goods manufacturing capacity utilization is still well above that 80% threshold, even though it's been trending downward. And how does that bode for manufacturing technology in the future? Now, we partner with both Oxford Economics and S&P Forecasting in order to come up with a forecast. Machinery orders are expected to be down about 5.7% this year. But if you look through the first half of the year, they're already down about 11%. So that means the second half of the year is really going to pick up. And if you look back historically, even in non-IMTS years, the second half of the year tends to be better than the first. The only time there's been 2 years in a row where the second half is worse than the first was during the 2001-2002 recession. And so we're pretty optimistic about the remainder of this year. Cutting tools are pretty much going straight upward. They've plateaued for a little while, the last couple months, but they are expected to continue their increase as people are starting to make more things and demand more technologies. Now, some of these seem optimistic, and I know there's a lot of hesitation that a lot of people are feeling, and I think the first one is interest rates. The thing cited by most people as what's causing them hesitation in the economy. But if you look at the historical trends, manufacturing technology orders actually tend to increase in tandem with interest rates. And I think it really goes back to, if you look at the fundamental reason why interest rates go up, it's to cool overheated demand. And in that environment of overheated demand, it seems natural that somebody's gonna buy the machine that makes the thing that people want to buy. So despite all the talk of interest rates being elevated, tamping down demand, I think we are, no matter what the Fed Reserve actually does, I think we are able to predict that manufacturing technology orders will continue to outperform the beginning of the year. And then secondly, the election. I know a lot of people have talked about this and said, well, let's just wait and see what happens. Now, not looking even at specific policy actions, just, who's in control of what. I wrote this article in 2022, right after the midterm elections, taking a look and see, does it even matter? On the presidential level, it really doesn't matter. There was no significant difference between either party of what happened with manufacturing technology orders. The interesting thing, though, is on the congressional level. And it, again, doesn't matter what party is in charge, but what was a significant finding was that the smaller the majority of the majority party, the lower manufacturing technology orders were. And I kind of scratched my head on that one for a minute or two, but then of course I turned on the news and I was like, oh, duh, okay. Because it seems logical that the thinner the majority party has, the more likely they are to have to rely on the fringes of their party, and who knows what kind of legislation is going to be enacted, what that means for manufacturing. So that would cause a little bit more hesitation than just a generally, oh, this party or that party. So while there are maybe some reasons to be concerned about the election, in general, it doesn't actually matter for orders of manufacturing technology. I'm coming right up on my time a little bit, but I do want to take a couple questions. And I can see everybody's like on the edge of their seat and they're like, oh my God, Chris, how do I learn more? We do have a press release that comes out the second Monday of every month. So you can see where machinery orders are going, where the cutting tool orders are going at a very high level. And we do drill down into a couple key industries every month and highlight where they are going. But I would like to take a couple questions if anybody has any. Oh, the question was about how much is left to go out in the 3 spending bills. It's in the hundreds of billions still available. Cool. Any other questions?
Toss the mic, please.
Yep. So the question was, where does the data come from? So all of the surveys are self-reported amongst AMT members. So we have about 650 different members. About 180 participate in the USMTO survey. About 50 in cutting tool and about 40 in work holding. So in a majority of product categories, we do have a majority of the market. Where we don't have a majority of the market, we at least have a representative enough sample that we can project the trends within manufacturing. Yes. Oh, just holding it, okay. All right, well, if nobody else has any questions or anything, I'll be around. Feel free to just come say hi, grab my card, or let me know what you think. Thank you so much.